speaker, which is the first invited speaker for the International Conference on Art, Culture and Heritage, Emeritus Professor Dr. Chesley John Skinner from University of Lethbridge, Canada, with the title of his presentation, The Arts and Societal Wellbeing. To you, Prof.
Okay, thank you. Let me just do a little, I'll do a little bit of stuff here. So right, here we go. Want to, this one here. I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm getting here.
All right,
but
okay.
All right, just give me a second, will you please?
Okay, sure, not a problem. Yeah. Okay, so while waiting for the next speaker, Professor Dr. Chesley John Skinner, all right, I would like to remind once again to all our viewers and participants, all right, you might want to check out our conference website, conference.ucyp.edu.my, for more updates, okay? And also you might, you can retrieve the link, all right? So we're gonna have paper presentation after this, okay? Most probably around 11:30 a.m. So we do have, for this two-day conference, we have more or less 30 paper presenters all around the world, from Indonesia, all right, from Malaysia, from Canada. Okay, so thank you so much to all of the participants who's, joining us for this International Conference on Art, Culture and Heritage. And I suppose that we talk about the first, the keynote address by our Vice Chancellor just now, all right? And the issues, updates, as well as the findings on art, culture, and heritage for societal well-being, developing transformational strategies. That is actually the theme, all right? So we can see just now the relationship between all the roles of arts in SDGs, okay? SDGs is one of the crucial agenda for the world. It's a global agenda, all right? So, and after this, we are going to move on to the next very interesting topic as well. All right, so Prof.
Yes, things have just gone wrong here. I had everything all set up and suddenly nothing is working anymore.
But we can see your slides now.
Can you see the slides?
Yeah, we can see your slide.
You can see the slide. You can see this one here.
Yeah.
Oh, fine. Okay, thank you.
All right, that's great.
Okay, I'm new at this, and I had to contact one of my students in Malaysia who on the phone today was guiding me through how to do this. But anyway, that was a really that was a very interesting talk, and it's so related to mine that it's almost as if we had kind of sat down together and worked it out. Yours is more practical, more of the strategy, whereas mine, because as you pointed out, I'm much older, mine is more of a theoretical basis and so on, right? But anyway, so I'm going to start out with this quote here. It says, "I used to be embarrassed because I was just a comic book writer, while other people were building bridges or going on to medical careers. And then I began to realize entertainment is one of the most important things in people's lives. Without it, they might go off the deep end. I feel that if you're able to entertain people, you're doing a good job." That's from the great Stan Lee, the man who was perhaps the chief editor, publisher, and so on at Marvel Comics. He passed away a number of years ago. If there's any doubt about the place of the arts in our society and the role they play in day-to-day events, the pandemic, which we are still going through, quickly brought us to the realization that, as Stan Lee said, without it, we may go off the deep end. The 2 years of COVID restrictions, for the most part, confined us to quarantine status with very little to do. Here's where the arts came in. Thanks to streaming, we watch movies and television and listen to music, and some of us even tried our hand at creating art. Amazon reported increased sales, and bookstores everywhere became invaluable resources. In a discussion about books in the COVID world, one bookshop owner said that the increased interest in books was because, quote, people are trying to connect. People are trying to learn, trying to make sense of the world. That's something that books can do. That and the entertainment value of books are no doubt behind Amazon's increased sales and the unprecedented use of Netflix, Amazon Prime, and all the other countries. Theaters were closed, but many people still subscribe to Zoom productions and live streaming of performances from professional theater companies. And there were audiences. The same goes for art galleries, virtual exhibits were accessed by people via the internet, and music has always been our go-to for help to relax, to escape, or change to a more positive mood. In fact, just a cursory look at some of the studies conducted during the pandemic attests to the role music plays in improving people's sense of well-being. For example, the study that was done in the United States. The findings of our study tend to show that indeed, for many people, there was an increase in the amount of music listening and in the intensity of emotional reaction to music. And these, unsurprisingly, were related to the intensity of negative emotions experienced during the lockdown. Nothing surprising there, but it does reiterate how dependent we are on the musical arts for personal effects. Music is even more part of our lives in that it is portable and it can be accessed wherever and whenever we feel like it. To talk about well-being in the arts, we should first of all deal with the question as to what it is. In this case, we are focusing on societal well-being, which should ensure that the individuals who make up our communities are content with themselves and their lives. However,
sorry
most
to interrupt you. Prof, sorry
yes.
to interrupt you. Are you still on slide 2?
Yes, there's no other slide yet for a while. I'm
okay,
sorry.
all right, okay.
Okay, all right.
Sorry.
However, most definitions of well-being encompass the physical, emotional, social, economic, and spiritual aspects of life. And I might add, our relationship with the space we occupy and the people with whom we share it. How many of us care about the space we live to the point where we decorate the walls in our favorite colors with our favorite artwork and so on? How many of us surround ourselves with music we love and often make the claim that the right music playing in the background enables us to get the work done? I would say that most people attempt to design their living space to make themselves feel better. Similarly, cities commission murals, art parks, and concerts to contribute to the sense of community that we all value. In fact, being content with one's geography figures prominently as to whether someone is in a state of well-being. And living around good people is crucial, which is why communities are essential for survival. The next question that needs to be looked at here is, what is art and how does it contribute to our individual and communal well-being? It seems that one of the problems with talking about the arts in terms of enabling good societal health is that much of that proves problematic when measurement is brought into the picture. It has been said that there is now a cult of measurement, and it's ever present within academic research. Simply means if it can't be measured, then it can't be quoted. In this exercise, arts refer to involvement in all forms, including theater, design, literature, music, film, dance, new media, crafts, and so on. And that involvement involvement might mean the creation of products, performances, or it could mean people engaged in the artistic process for therapy or just for the fun of trying something. It should be noted that many of the arts, such as theater and dance and film, require a community in order to explore and to create. If you should question the role of the arts in our society, you should try and imagine a society without the humanizing influences of the arts. You will have to strip out most of what is pleasurable in life, as well as much that is educationally critical and essential. Much of what could be identified as art often goes unnoticed until something deprives us of experiencing it. We depend on art to enable us to escape our immediate world by immersing us in something new and different. And overall, the arts play a significant role in our daily lives, both individually and collectively. We use them as a means of self-expression, to increase self-esteem, alleviate stress, and to provide socialization, entertainment, and to facilitate communication within the community. All of these, now I go to number 3, here we go. All of these activities generally contribute to our well-being and that of the society in which we live. It makes sense that Richard Smith's editorial in the British Medical Journal advocates spending less on health and more on the arts with the hope that health would be improved. It's a great quote and is one that I'm sure it's being used by everybody who's making a proposal for arts development. I don't think he's referring to arts therapy, such as drama and art and dance, but rather the way the arts engage the community and attends to the intrinsic aspects which we avail ourselves of on a daily basis. The arts have a humanizing effect on our society. It offers differing points of view, but also provides a sense of comfort. As I mentioned earlier, the pandemic was made more tolerable by our access to art, whether through music, movies, novels, or film. In fact, it's almost impossible to imagine life without them. As human beings, we seem to be inextricably tied to some aspect of art. Some of us may focus on gallery type art, but many of us prefer to surround ourselves with pictures, crafts, and reasonable facsimiles of the real. People say, I don't know much about art, but I know what I like. Now, according to the UN Declaration of Human Rights, everyone has the right to freely participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts, and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. Art comes from the imagination, which is something we are all endowed with. It is that which helps us imagine an alternative world to the one we occupy. And whether it be music, visual arts, drama, dance, film, animation, it all emanates from the imagination. The American playwright Tony Kushner recently commented on this in the New York Times. He says, I absolutely believe that one of the great pleasures of art and one of the great reasons that we have it, is to be able to witness leaps of emphatic imagination. Well, I mean, it makes sense that without an imagination, we can't empathize. You can't put yourself in somebody else's shoes if you have no imagination to be able to help you do that. We strive for content. The technology is fine, but without something to fill it, it's just technology. We crave stories. There is a Native American saying attributed to the Hopi and also to Plato that tells us that he who tells the stories rules the world. It's a beautiful expression because it's somewhat true. We are always trying to create the narrative. And in fact, our society is filled with people and factions that want to control the narrative. And nowhere is that more evident than in the world of politics. But individually, we tell our stories. And as people, we preserve stories and we pass them on to our children. These stories are a part of our art world, and we value them and create our own via film, television, theater, crafts, novels, and so on. And where do we get stories? Well, from folklore, from history, from the press, and from just living and observing from day to day. The arts challenge us through stories and contribute to our intellectual development and require us to be receptive of new experiences and the new stories. Without that, it seems that we would be lacking something essential to being a member of society. And now I go, okay. And here are some of the things which the arts do for us. The arts give us a feeling that we're not alone. We get a sense of belonging as we experience work that give us a sense of shared understanding and values, a bonding experience maybe. And of course, the joy that comes from watching something together and talking about it afterwards. It gives us a better understanding of who we are and why we do the things we do. Human beings are gregarious. That means we like to be in groups. We like to be together and celebrate together and talk together and so on. And as such, we want to be around people, especially people who are somewhat like us and to whom we can relate. Art can point out our similarities and can help us find our own voice. And it enables us to see things from different perspectives. And we all live in diversified communities where viewpoints are manifested by way of art, such as painting and film and so on. And from these, we often see a new way of doing things, of worshiping and of making art. Good art asks the question. It enhances uncertainty and suggests that we question the status quo. The American writer, critic and writer James Baldwin said that art asks the questions that have been covered up by the answers. And I think that's as close as we're going to get to something about what it is. And sometimes we can experience a work of art that enhances our concept of beauty and the spiritual. For example, here's a quote that I came across, and I want to share it with you because it's a quote attributed to the late JFK. And he reminds us of the intrinsic and the essential value of art. He says, art establishes the basic human truths which must serve as the touchstones of our judgment. The artist, faithful to his personal vision of reality, becomes the last champion of the individual mind and sensibility against an intrusive society and an offensive state. Art enables and supports an understanding between, supports an understanding between communities. Now, this is extremely important effect in this day and age when diversity within populations is being increased due to immigration. Often there are communities within communities, and efforts are being made to build bridges rather than walls. And the arts can do some of that. Each group of people brings with it distinct cultural practices, which when shared, promote a better understanding of history and people. Similarly, people use the arts to create stronger communities. and in doing so can enable people to understand each other on a much deeper level. And given the conditions that exist and persist in today's world, we are in a great need of mutual understanding and an expanded capacity for empathy. Research shows that the arts can be effective in education. And there's no question about that. I mean, I spent my whole career as a university professor using drama as a means of teaching. Drama, for example, like other art, is rooted in our ability to play. We learn through play, usually until we enter a formal school system, and then they stop it. It is play that allows us to try on new roles and explore new and fantastical experiences. Consequently, artistic process practices have been incorporated into teaching, and of late in healthcare, particularly in dealing with senior citizens. The arts can have, this is what that was talking about. The arts can have a positive effect on the economy through such programs as, I don't know whether they use this anymore, but it used to be very big. It was called cultural tourism, which means that people will go to places where that is culturally rich. We know that people and corporations are attracted to culturally rich areas, which directly affect local businesses. But most importantly, perhaps, it changes the whole fabric of the society, the community. Now, some of you may be familiar with Richard Florida's book from a number of years ago called The Rise of the Creative Class, where that class of people are often well educated and well paid. Nowhere is this better illustrated than through the work of the artist Lillier. And I go, what's this, 9? Now, her work, she worked in Philadelphia, and using only art and volunteers, she changed a rundown, abandoned, dilapidated part of the city into a revitalized and vibrant community. And it was done using the arts under the auspices of her group called the Barefoot Artists. She has successfully carried out similar projects in Africa and in China. And her work demonstrates that with like-minded people, the arts can transform communities and lives. I'm almost finished. As mentioned earlier, tolerance is immensely important within our community these days as people adapt or not to new people with new lifestyles and all that goes with it. Sometimes just seeing a performance from a different culture might transform us to a new context, and in so doing, assist us in getting a better understanding of another culture and its people. In addition to attending to our emotional side of things, art challenges us to enhance our intellectual development by introducing us to new worlds, people, and experiences, and relates these to our current viewpoints. Watching a good film or reading a book will no doubt introduce us to different ways of seeing and will ultimately be accommodated within our personal landscape. We have a natural sense of wonder that compels us to seek out different things, to ask questions in order to investigate and discover. For the most part, we want to know, and art provides us with avenues to explore and to ask questions. Last, but by no means least, the one thing that art does for us is called entertainment. Art can make us laugh, it can make us cry, and certainly make us think. There is a therapeutic aspect to being subjected to the arts. It can make us feel better, and during this pandemic, that has been of utmost importance. The arts, in some form or another, make up the essential part of our lives. Whether we engage in it intentionally or not, it provides us with a sense of who we are. It adds color and joy to what otherwise would be uneventful and drab. In fact, the arts play a central role in all aspects of social endeavors. Okay, 1 second here. 1 second. All of us, for the most part, are aware of the role the arts play in our lives and in making our societies more enjoyable and livable. We know that. But the world of research, where unless something can be measured, it doesn't count. There have been some attempts at measuring the effects of the arts, but generally these are intended to show that the arts have a positive effect on the economy, as if that is the only reason why we have the arts in the first place. But it's a valuable one, and it's one that people use when they're trying to convince the money holders, the government, that they should be spending more money on this and so on. The most intrinsic elements of simply enjoying, but for the basic intrinsic elements of simply enjoying the arts, it should be sufficient to do just that. And here we go. This is from the British Council. It says, life without the collective resources of our libraries, museums, theaters, and galleries, or without the personal expression of literature, music, and art, would be static and sterile. No creative arguments about the past, no diverse and stimulating present, and no dreams of the future. Or the next one is one of my favorite ones. This is by the philosopher Nietzsche, who says that if we have the arts so we don't die from reality. I believe that most of us would agree that without the arts, the pandemic would have been much more difficult than it was. And here we go. All right. It is apparent that the arts play a significant role in our lives as individuals and as a community. The pandemic has proven how essential they are in preventing us from, to use Stan Lee's words, going off the deep end. Universities must ensure that the arts are central to what is being offered, not something that can be discarded when the money is tight. We should all work together to facilitate the presence of the arts at all levels of society for entertainment and the other intrinsic effects that are inextricably tied to it. But we should ensure that we are not just consumers. We must enable and encourage people to become creators and content providers. It should tell our stories, not just those from the corporate world. And the last word I give to Weiwei, the Chinese artist who lives in Portugal, I think now. And this is what he says. Art is as vital as religion and science, an indispensable cornerstone of life. Even if it is eclipsed by human greed and desire, its emergence is inevitable, and all humanity will be better for it. Okay, I think that's the end of it, right? And so, if there are any questions, I would welcome them.
So thank you so much, Prof, for the, I would say, mesmerizing presentation. I mean, I love the way that you presented it. All right, so soothing, okay, and it's very, very interesting. Okay, yeah, I would like to remind once again to all our viewers and participants, should you have any comments or questions that you would like to ask Prof. I mean, our invited speaker for today, Prof. Dr. Chesley John Skinner, please help yourself. I mean, feel free to post the questions in the chat box, all right? So yeah, while waiting for the questions, Prof, there's something that perhaps I really appreciate if you can highlight a bit on this. Well, arts provide a pleasure. It unites us, all right? Don't you agree on
Sure.
that?
Of
And
course.
it helps us to see things like what you mentioned just now from a different perspectives. What would you say in terms of, how can we embrace art as value, and how can we instill that in the educational system?
Well, I mean, I think it's there's a societal attitude towards the arts that it's of no value. And I believe, from what I know about Malaysia, that in the education system in Malaysia, the arts are not very high on what we would call here in Canada on the totem pole, right? They're of very little value. I had students both at UITM and at Aswara who would tell me that as soon as they said they wanted to become major in drama, that their parents became very antagonistic towards them, because they knew that they would never get a job or something along those lines. So I think it's something, to go back to what Datuk said, the education has to change, and people have to be introduced to the arts. But I will go a little further and say, not only does the curriculum have to change, teacher training has to change. I mean, the business of teaching from a textbook should have gone out the window years ago, but there's still people doing it. But the arts should be a part of the curriculum from the very beginning. And if that's the case, then by the time they become adults, the arts will be something that they will value, not just as a frill, but as something that's important to what it is we do. I think that's it. I was going to tell the story. I don't know if I have time, and I'll just very brief story. When I was a dean in Canada of the Faculty of Fine Arts, I went to a conference in the United States of deans of fine arts from all over Canada, the United States, Australia, and I think Singapore was there too. And we were spoken to by the CEO of the Disney Corporation. And his advice to the deans: do not send us any more technicians. We have enough technicians, and if we want more, we can train them ourselves. What we need are content providers. People who can write a story, people who can tell a story, and find ways of entertaining people with that. I've never forgotten that, because it is so true in terms of the art. But somehow we tend to think that technology will do it, but that's not the case. Every university in the world is teaching technology, but encouraging students to write and tell stories and to be creative is something that should be done, certainly in Malaysia. If you want your film industry to take off, you need good stories, and I think that's where we are right now. So anyway, that's a long answer, but nevertheless, it's one of these things. Okay, somebody got a question here. Here we go.
Well, yeah, there's one question from James McLellan. What about arts as anti-establishment?
Yes, of course.
Culture?
Yeah, I mean, you just have to be sensitive. I think most countries have some limits that you can't go over. And Weiwei, that I spoke to, yes, his artwork has got him kicked out of China. But nevertheless, the same artwork has brought a lot of pleasure to people at other parts of the world. But yeah, I'm in Canada. I mean, there are limits to what you can do. I live in an area where there's a lot of fundamentalist Christians. So if you do plays that are, they might find offensive and they will be trying to get you to stop down, that's always going to be the case. But go back to what Baldwin said. Art asks the questions that have been covered up by the answers. And I think that's the essence of that. There are ways of doing it. You don't have to be blatant. You don't have to hit people over the head with it. But nevertheless, I know that in Malaysia, when I was there, students were doing plays, you know, where you had to drive practically out of the city to find where they were doing them. And some of these plays were a little anti-establishment. But they don't all have to be anti-establishment. I mean, plays are entertaining. I mean, art is entertaining, and therefore people will come and see it. That's about all I can say. Or you mentioned Banksy, whose work I like very much, but and of course cartoonists. I don't understand why the world gets upset with cartoonists, but then again, it happens everywhere, and I don't know why. Okay.
Thank you so much, Prof, for the feedback. Thank you once again to the participants who participated in our, we can say our discussion on the topic just now, the arts and societal well-being. Prof, well, it's just that there's one thing, because we are in this pandemic situation, a pandemic or endemic era, okay, and we cannot avoid technology. I mean, what do you think? Can arts and technology be well blended?
Sure they can. Of course they can. I mean, that's when it works beautifully, when you bring the two together and they work together as one. It doesn't work if you go see what I would say sometime, all I saw in that theater was a light show. I mean, they're just using the technology to bring in lots of fancy lights and do a lot of other things. But ultimately, with a play or with a film, what makes it good is generally the story. If you've got a good story, then usually you have a fairly good film. But the technology is there for us to use, but it shouldn't direct, it shouldn't control. It should be one of the tools that we use in order to make our statement more clear about what it is we're trying to say.
Great, thank you so much to Prof. Dr. Chesley John Skinner from University of Lethbridge, Canada. I think that's about all time that we have for this particular session. I mean, we love to have you once again, Prof, in our coming conferences, inshallah.
Can I just have one comment? Watching the video from about Pahang made me very homesick. I've spent 15 years in Malaysia, and it's become my favorite place in the whole world.
Well, come back.
I can't come back. The borders are closed, and
come back.
and I can't come back. I want to. As soon as the borders are open, I will be on a plane to go back.
Right.
I have more friends in Malaysia than I have in Canada.
All right.